2.Borobudur book is not a temple. Part 2. Santo Saba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on subjective academic studies and studies, this needs to be re-examined by experts in their fields. In an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. INDONÄSIARYÄ. By Santo Saba. Exploration and Research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +62813-2132-9787. Civilization in Sunda land is the earliest civilization. Human, we pay attention to the occurrence of a global disaster in its year. The archipelago experienced 4 times of glaciation or catastrophe, with the evidence that a living creature called Homo sapiens Javanese man was found in the land of Java, namely 1. Around 9600 BC. 2. Year 9000 BC. 3. 8900 BC. Global warming and rapid and sudden melting of the poles during the interglacial period. 4. 7200 BC the sea level rose again, so that the formation of islands as it is today, as evidence that Thailand was once united with the archipelago as the Kanpraya River which divides Thailand from the rivers in the archipelago. Civilizations that existed after the rise of sea levels were 1. The prehistory of Egypt became known in the Neolithic period, starting around 6000 BC Sumer. 2. Around 5310 BC, the sudden cooling effect of the climate in the Holocene period. 3. The Ramayana epic 5000 BC. 4. Prophet Idris 4533-4188 BC, Babel Iraq. 5. Prophet Noah 3993-3043 BC, southern modern Iraq. 6. Harappan civilization in the Indus River Valley 3300 BC. 7. Around 3150 BC, the flood. After this disaster the history of civilizations only started. 8. The Mahabharata epic 3000 BC. 9. Second migration to the Proto-Malay people in 2500 BC on the island of Borneo. 10. Gilimanuk site, Jimbaran Bali, 1800 BC. 11. Sapari Kuningan site, West Java 1000 BC. Broadly speaking, the Earth's surface experienced disasters evenly 4 times in Taham 9600 BC, 9000 BC, 8900 BC, 7200 BC. At this time the Sunda land sank and became several islands. The great civilization on Earth before it happened 4 times when the disaster was the Lemurian civilization estimated since 53,000 BC, the civilization of Atlantis in 24,000 BC. Mount Padang in West Java which is estimated to have started construction in 23000 BC. There were 2 major civilizations before the global disaster 4 times, namely Lemuria and Atlantis with its desert mountain Pyramida. Then in the time of Noah there was another global disaster around 3150 BC. The civilization that existed before Noah was 6000 BC. Sumeria recorded in the Gilgamesh story was recorded in 3000 BC. Ramayana 5000 BC. Prophet Idris 4533-4188 BC. Babylonian Iraq Prophet Noah 3993-3043 BC. Southern modern Iraq. Around 3150 BC. The occurrence of a global flood, namely the time of Prophet Noah. After this disaster the history of the second civilization just started, namely the Mahabharata of 3000 BC and the second migration of the Proto-Malay people in 2500 BC on the island of Borneo. So the largest civilization that exists on Earth is the civilization of the Lemurian era of 53,000 BC which continued to the civilization of Atlantis 24,000 BC who drowned in 7200 BC and rose again in Java to spread its civilization to Arabia by establishing Pyramida in 6000 BC. Previously made Pyramida, namely the site Gunung Padang comes from the word Pa Da Hyong 23,000 BC whose people are named Pa Ra Hyong and a large community of sun worshippers, currently named Parayangan. In the heyday of civilization in Java, it is recorded in the story Ramayana 5000 BC, the period before the flood of Noah, and the period after Noah that civilization still exists and is still experiencing its glory recorded in the Mahabharata story of 3000 BC. In the period after the flood of Noah, the world's largest empire and was located in the land of Java was the Saba Empire, a descendant of the predecessor of the civilization of Atlantis in 2400 BC. The Saba civilization had colonies to the Middle East, namely developing and controlling the Ma'an kingdom in Yemen. Developed through the Japanese archipelago to the Mayan civilization of Mexico, Latin America, with evidence of the existence of the Chichen Itza pyramida. That is why the shape of Suku temple is the same as the shape of Chichen Itza. This can be seen in the upper shape. There is a large area as a ritual procession for worshipping the sun. Mesoamerica and Maya civilization, during the formative stage or pre-classic era in Mesoamerica, c. 1800 BC to 200 AD, more complex and centralized civilizations began to develop, especially in what is now Mexico and the Caribbean. The civilizations that existed at that time were the Olmec civilization, 1400 BC, Zapotec, 600 BC, early Maya 200 BC, and others. The nations of Mesoamerica at that time were able to develop agriculture well, for example planting corn and other typical American crops, and creating a special culture and religion. Among the Native American civilizations prior to the arrival of Europeans, the Maya civilization was the civilization that had the most systematic characters. They showed outstanding achievements in the fields of art and architecture and were acquainted with advanced mathematical and astronomical systems. The site of the development of the Maya civilization has been touched by humans since around the 10th millennium BC. The first Mayan settlements were built there around 1800 BC, in the Soconusco area. Today it is the Chiapas region. In the architectural form of the Suku and Chichen Itza temples, the similarities are more visible. This proves that their civilization and culture are true originated from one source of advanced civilization, namely the civilization that has built pyramida with the same form of Pundan Barandik which originated from civilization in the past. Since this large island was called Sunda Land Meroe, the center of worship and ritual processions was at the top of a mountain range on the island of Java. In the book An Overview of Mayan World, by Professor Gualberto Zapata Alonso published in Mérida, Yucatán, Mexico in 2002, Alonso states that Maya art and religious awareness are similar to Indochina and Indonesia. Mayan religious symbols and animal myths are similar to those in Java and Southeast Asia, while in the Mahabharata and Ramayana there are tribes called Maya. According to Chinese historical records, the Yellow River was used for irrigation around 2200 BC by Yu the Great, a pioneer of the semi-mythological Xia dynasty. The Xia dynasty, circa 2100 BC to 1600 BC, was the first dynasty mentioned in Chinese historical records, including the Grand Historical Record by Sima Qian and the History of Bamboo. The spread of the Saba civilization to Latin America through the Asian continent, namely the land of India, Tibet, Babylon, Acadia, China and Egypt. This is marked by the similarity in pronunciation in calculations, the similarity between the dialects counting in Asia, China which is called the Nagas and the Mayans. In Latin America. Maya numerals. 1 equals Hun, 2 equals Ca, 3 equals Ox, 4 equals Can, 5 equals Ho, 6 equals UC, 7 equals UAC, 8 equals Uazak, 9 equals Balam, 10 equals years. Naga numbers. 1 equals Hun, 2 equals Cas, 3 equals Ox, 4 equals San, 5 equals Ho, 6 equals USAC, 7 equals UAC, 8 equals Uahox, 9 equals light bulb, 10 equals years. This is an explanation of the Shinto sun worship religion in Japan. Shinto Sun Goddess. Rites performed in Shinto religion primarily to worship the sun goddess Amaterasu Omikami, who is associated with prosperity as well as progress in agriculture, rice, which Japanese people practice in July and August on Mount Fujiyama. Therefore, the emperors of Japan are considered descendants of the gods. The Dictionary of Terms and Concepts includes the following information relating to it. The sun goddess in Japanese mythology, who was later adopted as a patron deity in Buddhism. According to the oldest historical records, Kojiki records of ancient things, and Nihon Shoki Japanese history, he was the leader of supernatural beings and also the ancestor of the royal family. In many of his writings, Nichiren Daishonin views Tensho Daijin as the personification of deeds that protect the prosperity of those who have a heart of belief in the true law. There are two oldest Shinto religious scriptures, compiled 10 centuries after the death of Jima Tenno, 660 BC, who was the first Japanese emperor, namely Kojiki, Records of Ancient Things, which recorded ancient events compiled in 712 AD, and Nihongi, History of Japan, which was written in 720 AD by a Japanese prince. Then there are two later works, namely Yengashiki, institutions during the Yengi period, and Manyoshiu, namely a collection of 10,000 leaves as the main work, but these are not considered holy books that were revealed. The Shinto Sun Goddess is called Tensho Daijin, who is also known as Amaterasu Omikami. Amaterasu is the queen of all. He is the son of Izanagi and Izanami, god of creation from Japanese mythology. The Japanese imperial family says that they are direct descendants of the goddess Amaterasu lineage. Dui Ratu is the key word for civilization that has something in common with the Saba religious empire. The autonomy of the Saba kingdom, which expanded in the Arab lands which controlled the Ma'an kingdom, was in 950 BC, with the center of the Saba kingdom which was in Java, which was directly ordered by Queen Bilqis, who was later conquered by Prophet Suleiman around 935 BC, namely at the time. History about Solomon is not recorded again in the years after him. The history of Indonesia experienced a period of absence of records about him in the period before the first recorded kingdom, namely Salakanagara 150 AD. There are few records about the kingdom around 300 BC, which, if we trace the kingdom, has a lineage of descent from Prophet Suleiman. So the standing of a large empire or empire centered in the land of Java, which previously Europeans named Atlantis and later became Saba, was a great empire that existed before the earth experienced 4 disasters, and when Noah's disaster hit the empire there was already a kingdom. Before Saba was the kingdom of Rama. A large kingdom of Saba existed and grew again after the disaster. That was the empire of Saba in Java. The kingdom and empire of Rama and then Saba existed before a creature named Prophet Adam appeared on earth under another name, namely Lemuria. Then Atlantis, which was conquered by the Lemuria nation by Atlantis, is recorded in the Ramayana story, and then after the time of Prophet Idris, Prophet Noah, the glory and golden age of Atlantis rose and grew after experiencing the flood of Noah's era. There was a battle and recorded in the Mahabharata story in the terrible war of the Bharatayuddha war. This we can find out in the text about the understanding of Far and the ancients as follows. Qs. Saba, and at that time, they said, "We believe in Allah. How can they achieve faith from a far place?" And in fact they have denied Allah before that, and they speculate about the unseen from far away. And prevented between them from what they want, as was done to people who are like them in the past. Indeed they were in deep doubt. The information above is an explanation of the Saba civilization that is far in time, namely the time before Queen Bilqis met the truth brought by Prophet Solomon, where Queen Bilqis in the Saba Empire had found the essential truth, the denial of the existence of Allah. And denial of the unseen, namely the existence of the land of the hereafter. Previous people in the pre-Saba period had the same wishes as people during the Saba period, but were hindered. Namely the desire and big ambition to rule the world. The times and events of the world from Adam to Solomon are written below, displayed so that you can imagine how many prophetic times the Sabaean nation should have known during the Bilqis period until the time above, namely the new civilization after the flood of Noah. 2 million years ago, the archipelago had been inhabited by pre-Adam and humans, with the evidence that a living creature called Homo sapiens Java man was found in Java. 150,000 BC, there have been living things with found fossils with estimates of life at that time, in Sangiran, Java Island. 2. The eruption of Mount Toba occurred 70,000 BC, causing major damage to the archipelago, giving rise to the thesis of human migration from Africa to the archipelago. 3. Maninjal Eruption 55,000 BC. 4. Lemurian civilization is estimated since 53,000 BC. 5. Bison painting made in Upper Paleolithic era, 50,000–10,000 BC, in Altamira Cave, Spain. Ancient paintings are archaeological records of the condition of mankind. 6. Mount Sunda Eruption 50,000 BC, forming the caldera of Bandung and Tengkuban Perahu as one edge. 7. Biak Cave Site, Papua 40,000–30,000 BC, the location of Biak District, found cave paintings and mollusca fossils, and another site is the Tutari site, Jayapura District, found boulders with reptiles painted on them, and there are 89 other sites in the Jayapura. 8. The civilization of Atlantis in 24000 BC based on Plato's records. 9. Mount Padang in West Java, which is estimated to have started construction 23,000 BC. Changer. The megalithic age relics are considered the oldest civilizations in the world that have ever existed, based on carbon testing, carbon dating. 10. 12,600 BC, Earth's polar shift or polar shift. 11. Disaster of the end of the last ice age 11600, 2000 AD equals 9600 BC. 12. In 1000 BC, there was a major global flood with the rise of the global sea level. 13. Around the year 9600 BC, year 9000 BC and the year 7200 BC archipelago occurred again. The sea level rose so that the formation of islands as it is today, as evidence Thailand once became one with the archipelago as the Kanpraya River which divides Thailand from the rivers in the archipelago, it is recorded using 3D seismic. 14. Around 8900 BC, global warming and the polar melting rapidly and suddenly during the interglacial period. 15. The Bobby Cave Site, Tabalong, the location of Mount Busabuli, the village of Randu, Uya Tabalong Estuary, found human fossils estimated by humans of the Austro-Melanesian race during the first migration of 8000 BC on Mount Meritus. 16. Prehistory of Egypt became known in the Neolithic period, starting around 6000 BC. Sumer. 17. Prophet Adam 5872-4942 BC, Data Wiki. 18. Around 5310 BC, the sudden cooling effect of the climate in the Holocene period. 19. The Ramayana epic occurred 5000 BC. 20. Prophet Idris 4533-4188 BC, Babylonian Iraq. 21. Prophet Noah 3993-3043 BC, southern modern Iraq. 22. Around 3150 BC, the flood. After this disaster the history of the second civilization has just begun. 23. The Mahabharata epic occurred 3000 BC. 24. Second migration to the Proto-Malays in 2500 BC on the island of Borneo. 25. Gilimanuk Site, Jimbaran, Bali, Gilimanuk location, Negara, Bali district. Site area 4 square kilometers found a skeleton in a jar which is estimated to have lived in 1800 BC years ago. 26. Sapari Kuningan Site, West Java, found stone burial coffins, a feature of prehistoric cultural life, also found bronze gerba kitchen utensils and former building foundations. It is estimated that there was a civilization around 1000 BC. There are 3 civilizations that emerged after the global flood disaster in Noah's time around 3150 BC. After this disaster the history of the second civilization just started. 1. The Eastern group, led by Yafet ibn Noah, is thought to have inhabited Sundaland, Sundanese Shelf, and from this group emerged a new race. 2. The Middle group, led by Shem ibn Noah, is thought to have inhabited Central Asia. They come from this group emerging a new race. 3. Western groups, led by Ham bin Noah, are thought to have inhabited mainland Africa. They come from Yafet, an ancestral archipelago. To understand, after the flood of Noah, the U.S., in the archipelago or more precisely in Sundaland, a community of Bani Adam Eastern group emerged, identified in Plato's term known as Atlantis Civilization. This community, having attained a high civilization for hundreds of years, was then destroyed by floods, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions around 9600 BC. This community eventually scattered to all corners of the earth. They later became the ancestors of nations in East Asia, such as the Mongoloid and Altai races. They even contributed to the technology of civilization in the world at large and left large buildings characterized by Pundan Barandik or pyramid. After the situation in the archipelago was felt to be quite calm, a small group of Sundaland people began to return to their village. And at their peak, they came in large numbers, around 2500 BC, 1500 BC. They became known as the Proto-Malayu people. Around the year 300 BC, came a large number of groups of people from South Asia, India, and Central Asia, who were known as Deutero-Malayu and brought the influence of Hindustan culture in the archipelago. The nations in the archipelago were largely the result of the assimilation of These two communities, namely Proto-Malayu and Deutero-Malayu, they are Zuriat descendants of Yaphet bin Na who developed, then gave rise to a new race from which the Nusantara Austronesian people emerged. Proto-Malayu and Sundaland, after the Prophet Noah disaster, all civilizations on Earth were destroyed and Yaphet bin Na, thought to have inhabited Sundaland, then built civilization in the Sundaland area. Later Sundaland finally became a center of world civilization, known as the Atlantis Saba civilization. In around 9600 BC, according to Plato's records, this Atlantean civilization was destroyed by a flood. The inhabitants of Atlantis were scattered throughout the earth. They later became the ancestors of nations in East Asia, such as the Mongoloid and Altai races. Lemuria, as the oldest civilization on Earth, the Lemurian civilization is estimated since 53,000 BC. The story of Lemuria and Atlantis, the disappearance of these two ancient and sophisticated civilizations is estimated to be almost simultaneously, namely in 2400 BC. Dr. Javier Carbera in around 1972 found ancient stones with pictures engraved which were allegedly the remains of the Lemurian civilization. The cultural remains of the Lemurian civilization scattered in various areas such as the Maya, Incas, Aztecs. The remains of Lemurian culture were also found in the Hawaiian Islands. The civilization of the land of Lemuria is said to be very advanced, maybe even more advanced than today. At that time the Lemurian civilization was able to travel between the galaxy. At the time of Lemuria there were 5 races that ruled, namely, yellow, red, brown, black, and pale skin. At that time the prominent culture was red skin, so it is likely that Indian, Aztec, Maya culture also originated from Atlantis. However, then the culture declined and then the black, brown culture in India began to dominate the world. This is most likely the glorious era which later became known as the Ramayana epic, 7,000 years ago approximately 5000 BC, and the Mahabharata epic, 5,000 years ago approximately 3000 BC. However, then this culture was destroyed after the very devastating Western War occurred. The possibility of the war using laser and nuclear technology, the residual nuclear radiation in the area that is thought to be the Kurukshetra field can still be detected quite strongly. It could be that this war resulted in the loss of the Mohenjo-daro and Harappa civilizations due to nuclear war at that time. One of the former nuclear craters still exists today. Mohenjo-daro and Harappa are known as mysteriously lost civilizations. As we previously knew about Atlantis or Lemuria, it has known technology that is more sophisticated than today. One of them is Lemuria crystal technology. I need to add this discussion with the Ark of Prophet Solomon, which is said to have extraordinary powers which until now has not been found, is still a mystery to this day. We can ask questions to reveal it. Where did the Ark of Solomon come from? Whether is it Lemurian crystals or high-tech objects during the civilization of Atlantis? This technology is believed to be more sophisticated than the most advanced technology in our civilization today. This people was the Lemurians. They are a good picture of mankind. Because according to the story of the people of Lemuria colonized by the people of Atlantis and left the earth because indeed the Lemurians love peace and do not want to fight the Atlanteans who eventually became extinct because of their pride. Sunk to the bottom of the sea called the Saba Empire. It is also believed that the creatures that people call aliens who do alien abduct are the Lemurians who return to Earth to see the development of the Earth. The Lemurians who moved to other planets or galaxies are believed to have created colonies in other galaxies, called the Pleiades alien race who live in the constellation Taurus. Some say they live on the planet Era or Terra in the Pleiades star cluster itself. Pleiades is a star cluster that is about 415-500 light-years from Earth, located in the constellation Taurus. The star cluster consists of about 250 to 500 stars including its 9 main stars. The Pleiades are also called 7 sisters, out of the 7 stars visible to the naked eye. As for the depiction of the Pleiades tribe race, which is believed to be a human who moved to planet Terra. One of Lemuria's advanced technologies is crystal technology. This discovery was made in ancient documents by Robert Charnock. As amazing as the discovery of a submerged city located in the Bahamas, Bimini Road by 5 divers in 1970. a pyramid with a magnificent golden hue surrounded by domes, buildings rectangular building, unidentified metal utensils, and a mysterious statue on top that contains 7 miniature pyramids. Lemuria is famous for its fertile continent which prospered, all kinds of minerals existed, just like Atlantis. However, it is said that Lemuria is not as sophisticated as Atlantis in terms of technology, even though the Lemurian civilization at that time was far more advanced than our civilization today. However, Lemuria has the advantage of being suave, mastering a high level of spiritual magic, and certainly love peace. Just look at the behavior of Javanese people, who are full of courtesy, soft speech, and the archipelago is thick with mystical or unseen nuances. Meanwhile, Atlantis was thick with nuances like war, while Lemuria was classified into Eastern culture, aka identical to Indonesia. Lemuria is spread between the Mayans, Incas, Aztecs to the Hawaiian Islands. In the Yonaguni area of Japan, underwater pyramids are also found, the remains of the Lemurian civilization. According to a Malaysian professor, it can be said that Nusantara is older civilization from the tribes between the Incas, Maya, Aztecs. Ancient Indonesia, in this case the Saba civilization, had the knowledge to build pyramids just like ancient Egypt. Pyramid Mount Padang in West Java, which is estimated to have started construction 23,000 BC, are previously claimed to be older than those in Egypt. What is even more amazing is that it was found at the bottom of the northern coast of the large island of Papua. A structure similar to a fortress is found, which is estimated to be 110 kilometers long and as high as a mountain, 1,860 meters, with a width of 2,700 meters. We can see it on YouTube by clicking Jayapura Wall. And once again, this is not exposed in the eyes of the world, even on Google Earth it doesn't exist. To complete that the ancestors on the island of Java already knew their ancestors, I will excerpt some ancient texts about the ancient Javanese version of Lemuria. Sakdorunj Ana Lindu Gedhi, Watuyago Tudig Mountains, Masaran Kui Mountains are swallowed by Wuda Embeljed. Wujud is rich in Gedhi food, in the form of animals, frogs, lizards, ula, worms, crickets, walang, sarda wo woan, mulwa, srikaya, cashew, duet, papahan, pineapple lan lialian. Kabe wants to maybe just be cramped to fuck the bottom of the bed, Europe nang kono. Panganane turu ning gowak sing duer utawa pang pang gedhi, during ana sing wani turu ning gua. Sabab gua gua kui mesthi is swallowed by the kingpin tiger. Wong wants the yen to die, because he is said to be swallowed by the dead, he is left behind. Wekasane diothel othel is fierce in animal hands. Balunj pating is scattered around the river. Bengawan Salapada, accompanying Gemalong, Kalijamb, S. Ragan Regency, Wasana Kurugan Lampur Lan Patas lined Bengawan Sala, also Anna Sing Tudig Friend Nandong, Nawi Regency. Wang Pula Lia Sing Wispada Duwe Culture Order, by Narani Wang Nana Wan to Aaron Wang Lejena. Yuga Sing Narani Gandaruwo. Anna Mane Sing Narani Limuri. The history book, Punika, Whitting in AD 1931, was so tired of Kathedan Tuan Pengandikan even that grand-great-grandfather prevented the village teacher, Tuan Ayang Pandita Kaninging Perdan Kenheng Nargapura, Pomahan, Sukalila and Prawata. Atlantis, we will see the view of Atlantis through a glass eye. Orizio Nunes dos Santos in his book Atlantis, The Lost Continent Finally Found, strengthened by several writings by Doni Irwanto, that Atlantis is located in Indonesia. In his notes, Plato wrote that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, and had a navy that conquered Western Europe and Africa 9,000 years before Solon's time, or about 9600 BC. After failing to attack Greece, Atlantis sank into the ocean, in just one day and one night. The final disaster of the last ice age 11600, 2000 AD equals 9600 BC, was the first of 4 catastrophe disasters that occurred in Sunda Land. 4 The disaster resulted in the formation of islands as they are today, which previously were large lands, or large islands Roman historians named Meroe. We can sort the years of its civilization, namely the Lemuria period 53,000 BC. Lemuria was controlled by Atlantis in 24000 BC, then drowned in 9600 BC, then rose and developed into a major civilization on Earth, with the previous major war in 5000 BC recorded in the Ramayana and the second major war in 3000 BC recorded in Bharatayuddha, which is called Atlantis, later developed into the civilization of Saba until the arrival of Solomon in 935 BC. In the Book of Timaeus, Plato tells of, in front of the mainstay Hygelisi Strait, there is a very large island. From there you can go to other islands. In front of the islands is a whole land surrounded by ocean sea, that is the Kingdom of Atlantis. At that time, the new Atlantis was about to launch a big war with Athens, but unexpectedly, Atlantis suddenly experienced an earthquake and flood, not until a day and a night, sinking completely on the seabed. A large country that surpassed high civilization, disappeared overnight. According to Critias, the Hellenic deity divided the territory for each god. Poseidon inherited the territory of the island of Atlantis. The island is larger than ancient Libya and Asia Minor put together, but will sink in an earthquake and become impassable amounts of mud, blocking passage across oceans. The Egyptians described Atlantis as an island located some 700 kilometers, consisting mostly of mountains in the north and along the coast, and covering longitudinal grasslands in the south, stretching in one direction 3,000 stadia, about 600 kilometers, but in the middle, about 2,000 stadia, 400 kilometers. According to Critias, 9,000 years before his birth, war broke out between the people outside the Pillars of Hercules, commonly thought to be the Strait of Gibraltar, and the people who lived inside the pillars. The Atlanteans conquered Libya as far as Egypt and continental Europe as far as Tyrrhenia, and made its inhabitants slaves. The Athenians led an alliance against the Atlantean Empire, and when the alliance was crushed, Athena fought against the Atlantean Empire itself, liberating occupied territory. However, later, there was an earthquake and a big flood in Atlantis, and in just one day and one night, the island of Atlantis sank and disappeared. Another passage from Proclus's 5th century commentary on Timaeus gives a description of the geography of Atlantis. According to them, there were 7 islands in the sea at that time, the Holy Land for Persephone, and also 3 others with enormous magnitude, one of which was Holy Land for Pluto, the other for Ammon, and the last of them for Poseidon, with an area of thousands of stadia. Did Plato call the land of Poseidon with Poseidon? Its inhabitants. They add to maintain the memory of their ancestors regarding the great island Atlantis that once existed and has ruled over all the islands in the Atlantic Sea and is sacred to Poseidon. Now, this has been written by Marcellus in Aethiopica. Plato's account of Atlantis has also inspired some parodic imitations. Just a few decades after Timaeus and Critias, the historian Theopompus of Chios wrote about a region called Meropis. The description of this region is in Book 8 Philippica, which contains a dialogue between King Midas and Silenus, a friend of Dionysus. Silenus describes the Meropids, a human race that grew to twice the size of an ordinary body, and inhabited 2 cities on Meropis Island, Eusbis city of Pius, and Makimos city battle. Meropis in the Greek dialect is identical to the word and pronunciation of Meroe, Ophir. Is the meaning of the word with the title Sunda land, Atlantis, the island of Java where the center of the Saba civilization is located. Keep up with the explanation. Orizio Nunes dos Santos, 1937-2005, AD, was a highly qualified engineer with many patents to his credit. He is a professor of nuclear engineering at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil, and has also worked as a geologist and climatologist. He is also an amateur linguist who has mastered Greek and Sanskrit among others. The Story of Atlantis. The Story of Atlantis comes to us from Timaeus and Critias, the dialogue of Socrates, written in around 360 BC by Plato. There were 4 people at a meeting who had met the previous day to hear Socrates describe the ideal state. Socrates wanted Timaeus of Locri, Hermocrates, and Critias to tell stories about Athens' interactions with other countries. The first is Critias, who speaks of his forefathers meeting with Solon, one of the 7 wise men, a famous Athenian poet and lawgiver. Solon has been to Egypt where priests there compare Egypt to Athena, and tell stories about the gods and legends of each. One of the stories of the Egyptian priest is about Atlantis. Atlantis, which is possibly a legend about people and land and is mentioned in Plato's dialogue Timaeus and Critias, has been an object of fascination among Western philosophers and historians for nearly 2,400 years. Plato, ca. 424 ca. 328 BC, described it as a powerful and advanced kingdom that sank, at night, into the sea around 9600 BC. After Atlantis grew strong, their ethics declined. Their armies could conquer Africa as far as Egypt and Europe as far as Tyrrhenia, present-day Lebanon, before being driven back by an alliance led by Athena. Then, under the divine curse, the land was struck by earthquakes and floods, and sank into the muddy sea. According to Critias, Solon in writing his poetry needed to interpret the names in the language and knowledge of the Athenians at that time, and when copying the names they were translated into Greek. Thus, names including Poseidon, Hercules, Atlas, Athens, Egypt, Libya, Tyrrhenia and Europe are the names of translations of the original names which Critias say he is still keeping. Ethnic ancient Egyptians were among the refugees and victims of the disaster, then resettled on the land which is now called Egypt. During the rescue, they carried records and registers, and these were kept in their temples. Linguistic and Alphabetical Studies of Rajang Culture in Southwest Sumatra by Sir Thomas Stamford Raffles, 1817, J. Park Harrison, 1896, E. Schroeder, 1927, and M. A. Jaspin, 1983, show some correlation between the Rajang language and alphabet with language, and the ancient Phoenician and Egyptian alphabet. Ancient Indonesia had the knowledge to build pyramids like the ancient Egyptians. Pyramid Mount Padang in West Java, which is estimated to have started construction 23,000 BC or previously claimed to be older than those in Egypt. The existence of Atlantis is supported by the fact that the story is described in great detail, especially in Critias. In addition, various conditions, events and objects such as two-season climate, floods, tsunami, orichalcum, geographical features, banteng, buffalo, and crops unknown to Plato are also described in lengthy and detailed words. Atlantis in the Java Sea, Sundaland or specifically Indonesia has been proposed as the location where Atlantis is located. The basis for this argument is that the Atlantic Ocean refers to the sea surrounding the continents of Eurasia and Africa, which was the understanding of ancient Greece before Christopher Columbus landed on the American continent. Proponents of this idea claim that the original Sundaland people who were displaced by tide or volcanic eruptions then made contact with ancient Egypt, which then passed on the story to Plato, but it is not necessarily that Plato got the story entirely in the correct details, including the location and time period. The first ideas regarding the relationship between Atlantis and Indonesia came from the foremost theosophist, C.W. Leadbeater, 1854-1934, ad. In the book The Occult History of Java, published in 1951. Atlantis as the sinking continent of Sundaland, Plato reveals that 9,000 is the number of years that have passed since the war that is said to have taken place between those who live outside the Pillars of Hercules and all who live in them. And that land is bigger than Libya and Asia Minor put together, and is the way to the other islands, and from here you can reach the continent opposite, which includes the true ocean. Quote, Q.S. Saba. And we made between them and between the countries that we bestowed blessings on him, several neighboring countries, and we determined between the countries distances of travel. Walk you through the cities by night and by day safely. 9,000 years before Solon's lifetime, ca. 600 BC, means about 11,600 years ago. The sea level at that time was about 60 meters below the present sea level. A map showing the land at 11,600 years ago has been extracted by the authors from the GTOPO 30 elevation grid published by the USGS. Traveling away from Sundaland, one can reach other islands such as Nusa Tenggara Islands, Sulawesi, Maluku Islands, Mindanao and Luzon. Passing through these islands, one can reach the opposite continent, namely the Sahul continent, which incorporates the continent Australia, Papua and the mainland connecting. This continent includes the Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean. So Plato's statement is the way to the other islands, and from here you can reach the opposite continent covering the true ocean, is so fitting that the Atlantis, which is hypothesized to be located in Sundaland, is correct. On the map, we can see that Sundaland is larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, fittingly as Plato expressed in his discourse on Atlantis. The Plains of Atlantis. Plato described the plain of Atlantis as flat, surrounded by mountains that descend towards the sea, smooth and not undulating, rectangular and oblong, 3,000 stadia, about 555 kilometers long, 2,000 stadia, about 370 kilometers wide, facing south, sheltered from the north, surrounded by a series of beautiful mountains and small. And there are prosperous villages and peoples, rivers, swamps and grasslands. This description matches exactly the geographical conditions as shown in the map below. Flat, smooth and non-undulating plain, descending towards the sea, the slope of the land surface in the area is mostly less than 1% descending southward towards the Java Sea and no visible mound on the whole plain. The current condition of the plains above sea level consists of swamp areas, tidal swamp irrigation systems, above water housing, water transportation, mangroves and peatlands. It is surrounded by a series of beautiful large and small mountains. There are two mountainous areas to the north of the plain, namely the Müller-Schwaner Mountains and the Meritus Mountains. The highest peak in the Müller-Schwaner Mountains closest to the plains is Mount Leongapran with an altitude of 2,240 meters above sea level today, while the one in the Meritus Mountains is Mount Baysar with an altitude of 1,890 meters. These mountains are mostly covered by primary forest, inhabited by various animals and as the residents of the Dayak tribe. Facing south and sheltered from the north, it is fitting that the plain faces south and is protected by mountains to the north. It is square and oval, about 555 kilometers long and about 370 kilometers wide. The plain shape is square in the south and oval in the north. They are almost the exact same size, 555 kilometers long and 370 kilometers wide. There are prosperous villages and people, rivers, swamps and grasslands. The plains in its current condition are located in tropical rainforest areas, have high levels of rainfall throughout the year, have warm temperatures throughout the year, are mostly swampy and have many large rivers and tributaries so that the area is fertile and rich in food and resource needs daily. The god Poseidon who is worshipped by the people of Atlantis is synonymous with Lord Varuna, a god in pre-Dharma archipelago mythology, both of whom are given the nickname, God of Water, or God of the Sea. So, Solon translated Varuna into Poseidon. The island of Borneo was once known as Warunapura or the place of the god Varuna. Furthermore, the Nagarakretagama manuscript mentions a country within the Majapahit sphere of influence called Barune, later identified as Barunai, a kingdom now known as Brunei. Later European sources in the 16th century referred to the island's name as Brunei by Antonio Piga. Sigeg 2. Kuna Makuna Age, advertising Sidarunj, Prophet Isa El was still sleepy Mios. Wang Nusa Bruni Kittle Sing Mengan Ning Sorat Pesasire Telik Sampat Sarda Neng Tepaskiwa Tenjin Bangawan Sampat Hillier, Ing Sawijaning Wektu Ketrajong Pageblug Gedhi. Jer Wang Wang Sampat Kui Pada was eaten by Satan Blarudan Sogrok Wedung. Wang Sing Pat is really dead, graceful little boy Sing Isa Demolan. Wang Sing says Europe Pada is really sad, newly Pada fleeing from the voyage to his knees, Samadra Bruni, Tumuju Ning Nusa Kenheng. Satan Blarudan Orawani, Samadra Nututi Wang, fled, Jer Weedi came to me, Bathari Wa Rana, Ratun Jim Samadra. Nusa Kendang equals current Java Island. Brunei by Antonio Pigafetta or Borneo by Duarte Barbosa. The Dutch and British colonials called the island the name Borneo. Batara Kala and Hercules both had an insatiable appetite, and were very brutal and violent throughout their lives. Apparently, Solon translated Kala to Hercules. The author hypothesizes the Pillar of Hercules is a boundary monument decorated with Kala's face, as is often found in Java and Bali. Buffalo sacrifices. At the end of Critias, it is explained that every 5 or 6 alternating years, the kings of Atlantis gathered to discuss and make agreements, ending with the offering of many buffalo sacrifices. The custom of offering buffalo for offerings only exists in Southeast Asia and Southern Central Asia. Of course, Plato did not call it a buffalo, because this animal is only found in the area, but as a similar animal, namely, bull. Remember about the Kutai inscription about the sacrifice of 1,000 buffalo. Temples and pyramids. Apart from menhirs, stone tables and stone statues, the Austronesian megalithic culture in the archipelago also features a terraced pyramid structure consisting of earth and stone, referred to as Hundan Barandik, which is considered one of the characteristics of the original culture of the archipelago. These structures have been found and scattered throughout the archipelago as far as Polynesia. Among them are found in the Hyang Argapura Mountains, Lebak Sibadug, Basma, Pangawangan, Sisalok and Gunung Padang. The latter is the largest and oldest megalithic site in Southeast Asia, which is 23,000 BC or older. Natawijaja, 2013. The Suku and Setho temples in central Java, years still being debated, show elements of the Austronesian cultural terraced Pundan which somewhat resemble the pyramids in Central America. The Pundan Barandik is the basic design of the Borobudur temple in central Java. As stated in Critias, the Poseidon and Clito temples were built on the central island, which is a hill, surrounded by circles of water. To reach the temple from the innermost circle of water, steps are required on the hillside. This may imply that this temple features an earth and stone stepped pyramid structure, a feature of the indigenous culture of the archipelago known as Pundan Barandik. Coconut. Plato wrote in Critias chapter 115b. And fruits which have tough skin, water is drinkable, has flesh and can be used as anointing oil. In addition to several other classical names, Kalimantan was once called Nusakankana, literally meaning Golden Island, as stated in the Jayabaya prediction of the Kadiri kingdom in Java in the 12th century. Drowning it to the seabed and its civilization is also lost in people's memories. Even more shocking is the research conducted by Eriso Santos, a scientist from Brazil. Santos emphasized that Atlantis was an area which is now called Indonesia. In his research for 30 years written in a book, Atlantis, the Lost Continent Finally Found, the definitive localization of Plato's lost civilization, he presented 33 comparisons, such as area, weather, natural resources, volcanoes, and farming methods, which finally concluded that Atlantis was Indonesia. According to him, the rice terracing system that is unique to Indonesia is the form adopted by the Borobudur Temple, the pyramids in Egypt, and the ancient Aztec buildings in Mexico. Based on Plato's writings, conference participants finally agreed on 24 geographic criteria that must meet the requirements for the location of Atlantis, namely: 1. The metropolis of Atlantis must be located in a place where the land once existed or was partially extant. 2. The metropolis of Atlantis must have a clear morphology in the form of alternating land and water in a central ring. 3. Atlantis must be outside the Pillars of Hercules. 4. The metropolis of Atlantis is bigger than Libya and Anatolia, and the Middle East and Sinai combined. 5. Atlantis must have been inhabited by an advanced, civilized, intelligent society. Literate population, with skills in metallurgy and navigation. 6. The metropolis of Atlantis should be routinely reachable by sea from Athens. 7. At that time, Atlantis had to be in a war situation with Athena. 8. The metropolis of Atlantis must experience suffering and severe physical destruction that is unspeakable, authentic proportions. 9. The metropolis of Atlantis must be completely or partially submerged underwater. 10. The time of the destruction of the metropolis of Atlantis is 9,000 Egyptian years, before the 6th century BC. 11. The part of Atlantis was 50 stadia, 7.5 kilometers, from the city. 12. Atlantis was densely populated enough to support a large army, 10,000 chariots, 1,200 ships, 1,200,000 troops. 13. The religious characteristic of the inhabitants of Atlantis was to sacrifice bulls. 14. The destruction of Atlantis was accompanied by an earthquake. 15. After the destruction of Atlantis, the shipping lanes were closed. 16. Elephants lived in Atlantis. 17. It is impossible for processes other than physical or geological processes to cause the destruction of Atlantis. 18. Many hot and cold springs, containing mineral deposits, exist in Atlantis. 19. Atlantis is located on a coastal plain measuring 2,000 by 3,000 stadia, surrounded by mountains directly adjacent to the sea. 20. Atlantis controlled other countries in its day. 21. The wind in Atlantis blows from the north, only occurs in the northern hemisphere. 22. The rocks of Atlantis were of various colors: black, white, and red. 23. Many irrigation channels were built in Atlantis. 24. Every 5 and 6 years, the inhabitants of Atlantis sacrifice a bull. Harry Truman Theory. This theory says that the ancestors of the Austronesian people came from the Sundanese land plains which sank during the Ice Age Pleistocene era. This population has advanced civilization. They migrated to mainland Asia to Mesopotamia, influenced the local population and developed civilization. This opinion was reinforced by Umar Angara Jeni, saying that Austronesian as a language family is a major phenomenon in human history. This family has the widest distribution, covering more than 1,200 languages that spread from Madagascar in the west to Easter Island in the east. The language is now spoken by more than 300 million people. The opinion of Umar Angara Jeni and Harry Truman about the distribution and influence of the Austronesian language and nation was also confirmed by Abdul Hadi W. M. Samantho, 2009. Koran Republica. Saturday, June 18, 2005 wrote that U.S. researchers stated that Atlantis was Indonesia. Until now, the story of the lost continent Atlantis is still shrouded in mystery. Some people consider Atlantis just a fairy tale, even though no less than 5,000 books about Atlantis have been written by experts. Some archaeologists from the United States, U.S., even believe that the continent of Atlantis was once a large island called Sunda Land, an area that is now occupied by Sumatra, Java and Kalimantan. About 11,600 years ago, the continent sank in a massive flood following the end of the Ice Age. According to Umar, one of the most important islands left from the continent of Atlantis, if it is true, is Natuna Island, Riau. Based on biomolecular studies, the native Natuna are known to have genes that are similar to the oldest Austronesian people. Austronesian people are believed to have a high level of culture, such as the image of the Atlanteans mentioned in the myth of Plato. When the Ice Age ended, which was marked by the sinking of the continent of Atlantis, the Austronesian people spread to various directions. They then created cultural and linguistic diversity in the local communities they visited in a very fast time, namely in the past 3,500 to 5,000 years. Today, the Austronesian family occupies half of the Earth's surface. According to Ariso Santos' research, these ancient Egyptian priests, clergy, inherited information about Atlantis from their ancestors who came from Hindustan, India, which is the second Atlantean civilization, from the civilization of the first Atlanteans in the Sunda land, Lemuria, or Nusantara. Ariso Santos also found a lot of information that led to his conclusion from artifacts and historical sites in Egypt. Ariso Santos also found that the story of Atlantis was related to the story of the gods in Greek mythology and the Paraketean first humans, their families and the people of their descendants. This story is similar to the story of Zeus in Greek mythology and legend, as well as the story in the Hindu holy book Rig Veda, Puranas. In the glacial age, the sea level had decreased drastically so that only the dry seabed became land. In western Indonesia, the dry seabed is called the Sunda Plain, while in eastern Indonesia it is called the Sahul Plain. The Sunda Plain has caused the western Indonesian archipelago to become one with the Asian continent, while the Sahul Plain has also connected the eastern Indonesian archipelago with the Australian continent. That is why the fauna and flora of western Indonesia are similar to those of Asia and vice versa. The fauna and flora of eastern Indonesia are similar to Australia. Humans who lived in the Pleistocene era were a species of Homo erectus, which supported the old stone culture Paleolithicum. Geologically, the western region of modern Indonesia appeared around the Pleistocene connected to mainland Asia. This region now includes the larger islands of Sumatra, Java, Kalimantan, and thousands of other smaller islands. This old land boundary is now known as the Wallace Line. Meanwhile, the eastern region of Indonesia, which includes the present island of Papua and Aru Islands, is geographically connected to the Australian continent and is older. The land of Saba, which is called Atlantis, has two gardens on the right and left. The author assumes that the words right and left are simple words that all humans on Earth will know the meaning of right and left, namely equator, which divides the garden into two, namely right and left or north and south. In fact, for the Sabaean people there was a sign of God's power in their residence, namely two gardens on the right and on the left. To them it is said, "Eat by you from the sustenance bestowed by your Lord and give thanks to him. Your country is a good land and your God is God the most forgiving." QS Saba 14. The known human-like creatures that inhabit this region are Javanese humans, who lived about 500,000 years ago. Homo erectus fossils were found in the late 19th and early 20th centuries in valleys along Bengawan Solo, such as in Sangiran. The first Homo sapiens fossils were found near Mojokerto, Wajik, on the bank of the Brantas River. Newcomers in the form of modern humans whose descendants are still alive today entered the archipelago at the earliest about 100,000 years ago. Based on the similarities between the remains of the cave figures, they are thought to have been the predecessors of the present inhabitants of Melanesia and Australia. The culture that is supported is Paleolithic, Old Stone. The Indonesian archipelago as it exists today was formed during the melting of the ice after the end of the Ice Age. Indian scholars have written about Dwipantara or the Hindu-Javanese kingdom of Dwipa on the islands of Java and Sumatra around 200 BC. The Tarumanagara kingdom controlled the Sunda region from around 400 to 600, which was continued by the Sunda kingdom until the 16th century. Prehistoric relics of the archipelago are known from various findings of graffiti, paintings on cave walls or niches in cliffs as well as from excavations at ancient sites. 2.Borobudur book is not a temple. Part 2 continues on to Part 3. Santo Saba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on subjective academic studies and studies, this needs to be re-examined by experts in their fields. In an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. INDONÄSIARYÄ. By Santo Saba. Exploration and Research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +62813 2132 9787.